Good morning, everyone. I'm Steve Ross. I'm the director of the Casden Institute and Distinguished Professor of History at USC. And on behalf of the Casden Institute, the USC School of Cinematic Arts, and the USC Department of History, I welcome you all to our today's short film screening and conversation, You Will Not Replace Us. Filmmakers Luke Harris and Josh Green were dorm mates at USC when they began collaborating on film school projects and living in the same dorm, learning in the same classes, and experiencing the same hardships during the pandemic together led them to discuss the ways in which their unique heritage and cultures have fortified them. This film confronts the complex relationship between Blacks and Jewish between Black and Jewish Americans and the common struggle as we face daily the fight of hate in our communities. The title of the film is in reference to the popular white supremacist replacement theory that we all heard at Charlottesville that is rebuked in this film. By bringing together Black and Jewish interviewees, the film sends a clear message that marginalized communities will not be replaced by bigotry and ignorance. The way we're going to run our session today is the film screening, which will be about 23 minutes. We'll watch that first, and then it'll be followed by a conversation between our directors and USC Cinematic Arts, Josh Green and Luke Harris, as well as Professor of Critical Studies, Michael Renov, and Assistant Professor of History, Elena Morgan. And to introduce everyone, Josh Green is an award-winning filmmaker from San Clemente, California. He obtained his BFA in film and television production from USC's School of Cinematic Arts. And while there, he directed Waves Apart, a documentary about anti-Semitism in surfing, which received recognition as a Student Academy Film Award finalist. And out of nearly 1,800 submissions, it was one of 7 documentaries awarded this title. Having its global premiere at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, Waves Apart then screened at the Cannes Film Festival, where it won the Best Documentary at the Cannes Emerging Filmmakers Showcase. And Josh is also co-founder of Landport Productions and co-director of YWNRU, which won the Audience Award at the Annapolis Film Festival. I'm also delighted to say that we showed Josh's film soon after it came out. And Josh's partner, Luke Harris, is an award-winning director, writer from New Orleans, a graduate also of USC's School of Cinematic Arts, Film and Television. He served as president of the African American Film Cinema Society that was founded by John Singleton. He's the winner of the 2022 Create Louisiana French Cultural Film Grant for his film Tambou, and a finalist for the 2022 New Orleans Film Festival South Pitch. He directed and wrote the documentary Pam, as well as writing and editing The First Day of Being Black, which won the jury award at the Student DGA Award presentations. His show, Provenance, won the Best Drama at the College Television Awards and was selected for Series Fest. Welcome, Luke. And our 2 interlocutors, Michael Renov is a professor of critical studies and vice dean at the Cinema School. He is the author of Hollywood's Wartime Women, Representation and Ideology, and the subject of documentary. He has written and edited several other collections dealing with documentaries. And in 1993, Michael co-founded Visible Evidence, which is an international interdisciplinary documentary studies conference that has now been held on 5 continents. Professor Renov's teaching and research interests include documentary theory, autobiography and film, and video art and activism, and representation of the Holocaust. Welcome, Michael. And our last interlocutor is my colleague, Elena Morgan, from the Department of History. Trained as an historian of the African diaspora, Professor Morgan's research focuses on the historic utility of religion, and particularly Islam, in racial liberation and anti-colonial movements of the mid to late 20th century Atlantic world. As part of a body of work of intellectual, political, and religious history, Professor Morgan's research teases out the connections between religious identity and racial formation, intellectual discourse and grassroots activism, and local and global politics. Welcome, Elena. At this point, I will ask our tech crew to show the film. Afterwards, we will have a conversation amongst the four of our two filmmakers, two interlocutors, and in the last 20 minutes, we will open up to audience questions. So take it away. Here's our film. Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed our film. In a minute, I will have Michael Renov moderate our discussion amongst Michael, Josh, Luke, Elena, and himself. But for those of you in the audience, if you have a question, please type it into the chat box. And at 12:20, roughly, we'll go to Q&A and try to answer your questions. But when you write in a question, please make it a short question, not an essay, because we'd like to get to as many of those questions as we can. So, Michael, I turn it over to you as our moderator.
Thanks, Steve. And hello to everybody. This is really wonderful for me because as someone who's involved at the School of Cinematic Arts, to have two of our recent graduates make a piece of this importance and to have done this together is, it really underscores the theme of unity and alliance, the collaboration between the two of you. And Elena, I want to make sure to give you a chance to launch a question. But before I do, I just want to ask the two of you, Luke and Josh, to talk about what in particular, I know you were friends from the beginning of your undergrad experience, but was there a single moment, a single incident that launched you into this project? And if you could describe what that was.
Yeah, after Luke and I worked together on Waves Apart, which was our previous documentary, I remember we started having a lot of conversations and talking on the phone about current events and tension we were noticing between our communities and how both of our communities were facing really common struggles in the 21st century. And ultimately, we just decided, why don't we start to research this a little bit more and maybe dive into some interviews.
Luke, any thoughts on this?
Yeah. So, and on top of that too, I think this is when the time where we had the opportunity to pitch at the Annapolis Short Pitch Competition, where that was helping. They gave us $30K in goods and service, which helped launch this project. But Josh and I, we both knew we wanted to make a project that, talked about the relationship between our two community and that, where is this kind of misinformation is coming from, and, where does, this divide, and where is our history? So, we just want to make a film with us just coming together and collaborating on this project.
And it does seem as though it's likely that the kind of pressure around alliances, or the fraying of alliances, as one of your subjects says, has only become more striking since you began the project. So, it feels as though Charlottesville is in the background, Kanye West and some of his statements are in the background, but it feels as though unfortunately, it's a very well-timed film. And Elena, I want to ask you if you'd like to say anything on this question about temporality. You're a historian after all, but much of the film, well, at least it begins by taking us back to the history of racial strife and the relationship between Jewish Americans and Black Americans in America. But how do you see this in terms of fitting into a historical framework versus something that feels very present?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I thought that the film did really, really well is to really kind of position the mutual suffering, right, of Black and Jewish people. And I think a lot, and Luke, you had said something in the movie that I also, right, was often presented with as one of like 5 Black people, right, in a town of mostly Jewish and Italian people, which is right, this idea that Jewish people maybe have it worse than Black people, right, because of the Holocaust. And I shared kind of at the time, like your shock and hurt about that, right? And not knowing really what to say. And I thought, why is it, right, that we're in the kind of like this tragedy suffering off? And so I think, as a historical matter, right, I think that some of the things that the film really brings up, one is the ways that people really have overcome the white supremacist project of trying to divide us, right? And I think that it's really important, right, to recognize that in that the people who are in power have a vested interest in keeping us apart and having us do this kind of who had it worse, right? Like, and whose suffering should we be focusing on? When in reality, we've both suffered, right? And it isn't important who's had it worse, but that if we bond with each other, right, and we create alliances with each other, then we can actually overcome our oppression together. And so I think, one of the things that I really I think about 2 things really, and I'm interested to hear what everybody's opinion about this is. I thought that you guys did a really great job of talking about the ways that the civil rights movement brought people together, right? I'm interested to know what you think are the ongoing barriers, right, to Black and Jewish solidarity, particularly in the 20th century, and what does the future of Black and Jewish solidarity really kind of look like? I think, right, like when we look at it historically, we both see people getting together, right, overcoming their differences. But we also see, right, as you point out in the film, right, that because people live in very insular communities and have maybe only 1 or 2 examples of interaction with each other, right? Like one of the examples that you give in the film, right, is the fact that a lot of Black people have Jewish landlords or Jewish store owners, right, in communities where they don't own the means of production, they don't own, right, their homes and everything. And so that's their first entree into knowing Jewish people. So what are some of the ways that you see, right, there being a barrier, right, like to the future, right, of these alliances? What do you think can be done about it? I think that your film is a great start. And what are some of the
Yeah.
concrete ways that we can overcome that?
Luke, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. I mean, it's such a big and complicated kind of question and issue. Is like, how do we bring together the Black community and the Jewish community? And I think when Josh and we made this film, our goal was really, anytime we had screenings, is bring both those 2 communities together. Our goal for the film is really creating a bridge. And I think part of what, and part of that, that statement I made in the film and experience where, in high school, someone told me like, oh, like Jewish people had worse than Black people. And I really at the time I didn't know how to respond, but I think now I feel like I would respond saying, would you rather get hit in the head by a brick or a stone? They're both going to hurt. And I think that like comparing our traumas and that pain is not necessarily going to help us move forward together. But how do we, come together and work as allies? And I think that can be start even on the smallest fronts. It always starts in the small communities, and just bringing a few people together and just having conversations. And even in a younger, and getting kids together, more Black and Jewish kids together, and just playing and having fun or enjoying food together. And I think that breaking bread between our two communities is really the step forward, and that trickle effects to, to something bigger. So, for instance, this film right here, Josh and I, just from two communities coming together, making it, is really what we symbolically want to do and want to show and be kind of the, just kind of the inspiration for other Black and Jewish people just to come together and just to talk and just have fun together.
So I'd like to go back a little bit just to talk about the kind of the nuts and bolts of the film, because yes, I think what's key here is what the film can help to produce in our communities, but the more effective your film is, the more likely it is for making change. So I'd like to go back to what some people might call casting, right? So how do you decide in a short film who you want to talk to? And I think you made some very good choices. Amos Brown was unknown to me previously, and I found him to be very powerful. Michael Berenbaum, on the other hand, I think is extremely well known in the Jewish community, very well known as a scholar of the Holocaust, et cetera. But I didn't realize that connection through the Goodman connection back to his student days, or the fact that he had been so involved in the civil rights movement. It wasn't a big part of his identity. So could you guys talk, both of you, about how you chose the people who you asked to speak?
Absolutely. Well, as independent filmmakers, our ability is somewhat limited, but we did our research and we would find one incredible person that possibly led to another. So, when we had an interview with, Michael Berenbaum, he said, "Oh, you need to reach out to Aryeh Cohen," and that's how we learned about the Black Jewish Justice Alliance, which they may not be as well known as what Michael Berenbaum is doing, but they're right here in downtown Los Angeles, meeting every week, trying to figure out how to create more coalitions between all marginalized communities, including the Black and Jewish communities. So for us, we had a combination of both intense research and a little bit of luck as well. Amos Brown was the last interview we filmed, and turned out to be one of the strongest that we filmed in San Francisco, because his words to me really transcend the whole piece. He really speaks about unity for all people, and that was what I found most powerful.
Yeah. And what we really want to do is make sure it was 50-50, and, we wanted to have someone speak from the ADL and from the NAACP, and just making sure, and even Pastor Q and Rabbi Aryeh, them themselves is a reflection, them just being from two communities, coming together, working together. And they were just so perfect of like what we're trying to say with the project. And even like the generations of it's being passed on, is passed on to us. And Josh and I, we want to pass on to other generations and younger people. So I think that was all our part of decisions of, who we wanted to include. And I think Joshua, we're just so happy to people we include, because their words were just so powerful.
And yet you guys chose to cast yourselves very centrally, especially, your final moments are performative. You're up there, you're kind of reenacting something and reversing it, but you've chosen to put yourselves in your film in a very profound way, not just voiceover, but your physical presence and the fact of your, as you say, really being 50-50 all the way through. I'm sure that's a very conscious decision on your part, but talk about that if you would.
Yeah, I think initially, I think initially we weren't intending to be in it, or at least I wasn't I wasn't thinking about being in it. But I think when we really dug into the project and just realizing like the importance of us being in it, because we are the co-directors, we are the creators, and what statement are we making if we're not actively in it? And I think that's something that's was really made the film just even more powerful, is just the fact that we were a part of it, and that we are willing to take a stance on something. And I think especially for the ending moment, just seeing just two friends just calling just for unity for our two communities, it's something that I think a lot of people just need to see.
Yeah, I'll add on to that as well. I just want to say, Luke mentioned building bridges, and having both seen what happened on that bridge at the 405 with those neo Nazis, I think it was important for us to go and directly respond ourselves, because a lot of Black people, Jewish people, and especially younger people in our community might feel afraid of some of these forces in our country that are trying to scare people and intimidate people with their hate. And I think us doing that shows that you can just be who you are and really be proud about it.
I mean, it literally is walk the walk, right? So you're modeling. I see it as modeling the behavior that you want to see in the world. So, Elena, I want to give you a chance to enter back into the conversation in whatever way, because I'm going to talk about the film as a film, but I know you have other issues, and I want to give you a chance to really speak to that.
Yeah, I actually have I want to actually maybe piggyback on what Michael just asked about the issue of casting and about who you decided to talk to, right? So you mentioned, right, kind of the NAACP and the ADL, but that only represents, right, kind of two perspectives, right? Like one perspective in each community. So I'm wondering, right, why you didn't try to interview, right, other people with other opinions, why you didn't. And maybe I have a sense of this because sometimes I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to give neo-Nazis a platform, right? Like, I don't want to give anti-Semites a platform. But you obviously made a conscious decision, right, to not get the opinions, right, of people who have anti-Semitic opinions or racist opinions, right? Like, and to really concentrate on the solidarity aspects. Can you comment on why it is that you decided not to?
Yeah, I think well, one, because it is a short documentary, we're just limited on time, and how do we really impact this, this really complicated issue? And I think, we really wanted just to have something that was really just for our two communities and people involved, to be kind of the talking in the forefront of the project, just like how we are involved with it. Not that being said, we definitely did have this conversation of whether or not we should reach out and include them into the conversation. But I think inevitably we end up deciding just to keep it, just people from our communities. But I also want to add too on the casting in as well. We did also include, people who are Black and Jewish within the film, and I think that's something that we were even more happy to include, because the people who intersect between the two communities. And I think that's just representation that, often people are not real aware of, that you can be Black and Jewish. And I think that's something that, what Emily Noble said, that's one of my favorite parts of the film, when she said, like, she can hide being Jewish, but she can't hide being Black. And I think that's like something that's so true, that people who experience both sides, but you got Josh adding on.
Yeah, exactly. Like Luke and I had those conversations, like, when I go into a public place, like I can hide the fact that I have this Jewish identity, but Luke cannot. And so even though we wanted to look at some similarities with our communities, we also wanted to make sure that we, made it clear that, there can be this alliance, but we also have to recognize the differences in our history and our struggles. And instead of, pointing fingers or trying to figure out, who needs more help or who had it worse, the better idea is just to have constructive conversations and come together. And yeah.
Well, I want to also remember the fact that race continues to be a part of our public conversation during this presidential cycle. So there's been a lot of talk about racial identities as if they're mutually or contradictory in some way, as though the notion of racial mixture, being multicultural, multiracial, and which doesn't really come up very much here. And yet we're hearing a lot more statistics about how the future of our country is towards multiracial American identities. I wonder, if you could address that just a little bit, given this particular moment that we're in.
Yeah, ultimately, we're each year moving closer to what the real American dream and the real promise of America is supposed to be, which is this melting pot, this land of opportunity. We've always considered this country to be a melting pot, but only now are we starting to see, a growing diversity in this country, and also for the leaders in this country to represent what the people look like. Like we need to make sure that the people leading this country represent who makes up this country, right? And we know that the country's got a lot of Jewish people. We know the country has a lot of Black people, and everything in between. And so there's a reason why we made this film now. We wanted to show that there is definitely a lot of trouble facing the Black and Jewish communities, but also there's a new sense of unity being built.
And can I just pop in for just a second about that? And I think that that's the thing, right? This issue of race mixing, right, and becoming a true melting pot is the thing that racial nationalists, right, are the most afraid of, right? Because, honestly, I think, and maybe this is a little Pollyanna-ish, but I think that love is the biggest, right, like solace driver of solidarity, right? Like when you have people like the woman that you had in your documentary, right, the Black and Jewish woman, right, obviously, right, this is somebody from the Jewish community, somebody from the Black community coming together in love, right, and making a family together. And that's part of my family history too, right? Like my brother and my sister-in-law, and they're Jewish, their kids are Jewish, right? Like, so it's I think that this is very scary for these people, because I think that it's very difficult to break alliances that are built on mutual understanding, love, right? All of these things. So I thought that that was just really brilliant, right? The way that you brought that woman in. So.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll say too, like when we set out to make this film, we wanted one or two things to happen with our interviews. We wanted either a Jewish rabbi and a Black pastor together in a shot, or a Black and Jewish couple that we could follow and learn about their love and their relationship and their family. And we got the first one. I think if we ever had the opportunity to expand this, love and family is such an important topic in this regard, because it shows that this is a place where in the United States you can be Black and Jewish, and some people might not even know that you are, but that's okay, and that's the representation that we wanted to show in the film.
Steve, I think there might be some questions that have come up in the course of our conversation and the film. Is that the case? You're muted at the moment, Steve.
Now I'm not.
Yeah.
The first question that has come up for our two filmmakers is, where can people see it if they want to download it and screen it and show it to others? Will it be available any platform soon?
We're currently making our festival run right now. So we're just early stages of our film festival run. So it's not out publicly at this moment, but we hope in the future we'll be on a good, really nice streaming service that everyone can watch it.
Okay. I have a question here for the panel. How do you suggest dealing with Jew-hating Black spokespeople like Louis Farrakhan?
Well, I do have to say that I thought it was brave in a short film like this that you did include an image of Louis Farrakhan, and that piece of rhetoric from his perspective was included, and it is addressed to a certain extent. But yeah, I thought that was a way of including it without focus. But I want to hear what you guys say about that.
Yeah, just like neither Luke nor myself are pretending like we are, the spokespeople for our entire communities, right? I don't represent the Jewish community. Luke does not represent the Black community as a whole. We're just individuals. And so when we see, people with large platforms say things, obviously that does not, reflect an entire community. But one thing that we wanted to highlight in this film is the danger of celebrity impact that could happen, on, especially people who follow other leaders, people who look up to what people say and then continue to spread hate. That was something that we wanted to denounce.
And it doesn't represent all of us, and I think that's something our film really is the center of, is really friendship, and even though there's people who spout hate, there's more love and more good on our side.
Yeah, if I could say something that I don't know, I've become somewhat of a Louis Farrakhan expert over the last decade, actually. It's very unintentional, but I think that the way that you deal with this kind of thing is in two ways, right? One is to recognize, right, as Josh and Luke said, that these are one opinion, right, in a sea of many opinions, right? So to say something like, okay, well, because Louis Farrakhan or Kanye West are both Black people and are having anti-Semitic opinions, right, that they're launching on Twitter or their platforms, and that represents what Black people think in general, right, it is incorrect, right? That these are fringe opinions. I don't think the vast majority of Black people are anti-Semitic, right? I think that the vast majority of Black people don't want anybody to suffer, right? Because they recognize that they've suffered themselves. And so I think that focusing more on friendship and alliance is the way forward. I think that maybe there's three things. Two, right, that these opinions should be roundly condemned, right? That you should not, right, be able to, without somebody saying that this is wrong, to launch anti-Semitic opinions, just like on the other side, you should not be able to launch racist opinions against Black people, right, using the N-word or talking about, right, Black people living in ghettos or how, right, they're animals or like anything, right? You shouldn't be able to do these things. But I think that the third thing is that, as a historian, you often, whether or not you condemn these opinions or not, try to understand where they come from, right? And I think that you brought up in the film some of the reasons that people like Farrakhan have opinions about. I honestly don't know why Kanye West is anti-Semitic. I have no, 21st century is a little too soon for me. Maybe I'll understand it in another 20 years. But, I think that somebody like Farrakhan, I mean, one of the things that you point out, right, is that a lot of times, like the interactions that Black people have with Jewish people are negative, right? That have to do with people owning large amounts of property. The example that I know of, right, is the Hasidic community in New York, right? And there's always been a lot of tension between Black and Hasidic Jewish people, right, in New York. So I think that it has to do with a limited contact, right? And I think, which is an unfortunate human tendency that we need to educate people to get out of, is to take the one example that you have that might be negative and then extrapolate that to every single other Jewish or Black person that you know, right? To say that because maybe some Jewish music executives are bad, that means that all of them are bad, right? And trying to control the world. Or because some Jewish people, right, are landlords in Black neighborhoods and are exploitative, that means that all Jewish people are exploitative, right? So I think that education is the way to do it. But I also think that, you know, we should condemn these people and ignore them, right, and move on and try to figure out who it is that we can interact with to build the types of alliances that we should focus on the positive, right? I think that that's the way forward.
I have a question here, a very quick one. I also want to encourage the audience to enter in any questions you have in the chat box. A very brief one going back to screenings. Someone wants to know, is this going to be screened at the Palm Springs Festival this year for 2025?
We did not submit to Palm Springs, but we do have a screening coming up in San Diego at the Coronado Film Festival. That's going to be in November. And we'll be hearing about more festivals in the coming weeks and months. And the more we know, the more we'll share online for people to find out about.
Yeah, you can follow us on our Instagram page. You will not replace us .film. So.
And word of mouth always helps. Tell your friends.
Well, I have a question, which is Jews have been known as children of the book. And we've seen in your film so much, going back to Martin Luther King, so much of the civil rights movement within the Black community came out of the church. So to what extent, you want to comment, both our filmmakers and maybe Elena come in on this, how much has religion been used to both divide and to unite the Black and Jewish communities?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, I think one thing that, you know, I stress needs more education is that, you know, being Jewish does not necessarily mean being religious. I think today a lot of Jewish people view it more as a cultural heritage, right? So I think that's something that needs to be clear. But I also think in our film, you know, we do talk about how the church was a thing that brought, you know, Black leaders and Jewish leaders together. I know that Rabbi Heschel and Martin Luther King Jr. Really bonded over, you know, the gospel, and they really formed a friendship over these types of theological discussions. At the same time, we wanted to highlight what Amos Brown calls religiosity, which is this weaponization of religion to use it as some kind of excuse for some of the white nationalist, racist behavior that we see in our country today.
Yeah, I think it kind of all goes back to like what we're kind of saying with the, you know, what's kind of benefit of it, and using religion essentially as a way to divide us, where I think it's making us ignore the more kind of important issues, and we lose that allyship when it's kind of used as a way to split us apart. But I also think there's, you know, especially during the civil rights, the importance of the church and bringing that as unity. So, you know, I think one thing we really hope for is the using the church and using, you know, maybe our differences and similarities to really come back together and, you know, really building these bridges, you know, so we can stand strong together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, I think that religion has been used, I mean, historically, right, to unite and to divide people. I mean, you only have to look to all of these countless religious wars, right, that have happened over history, conflicts that are happening right today. to understand that religion often is used to divide people, right? That this idea that my God is more important than yours, right? Or that because I'm this religion, right? Like I have particular rights, right? I think that that's very obvious. I think the less obvious thing, and one of the things that I try to bring out in my research is exactly what Steve just mentioned, right? Which is actually the extent to which religion serves as a way to unify people, either right within the same religious tradition or across different religious traditions. Um, and I think that the civil rights movement is one of the most important examples, right? And it's really coming, and the work of Dr. King in particular, right, is coming up at a time when liberation theology, right, like Latin American liberation theology, right, like is really becoming a thing, right, and proliferating. Um, and one of the things about liberation theology, right, is that it says, right, like religion is a force to liberate all of humanity, right, for civil rights, to make sure that people have food to eat, to make sure that people are taken care of, right? And so I think that that's the thing that we can really focus on, right? Is the extent that we're not going to solve, right, the issue of religious warfare, right, or conflict. But I think that if we focus on the ways that religion actually can be used for solidarity purposes, right, to really understand how to drive, right, liberation and solidarity and human well-being, I think that that's one of the things that I really enjoyed, right, about the film, is that it was really kind of focusing on the ways that people within one religious tradition or different religious traditions, right, are really kind of trying to focus on what is it about our religion that drives us, right, to make these changes and to have these solidarities. And I think that that's a very, very powerful thing, both historically and now in the 21st century.
You know, to take the other side for a minute of religion being used to divide and going to Charlottesville, the title of our film, The Jews Will Not Replace Us, is this notion that in my own research, I didn't know until I started writing this new book, Christian identity. The Christian identity movement, which really, it started in England in the 1890s, but in America really grew in LA in the 1940s with Wesley Swift. And part of the people who are chanting, the Jews will not replace us, are really calling upon Christian identity, because essentially what it says, Christian identity says that Jews are not the chosen people. Jews are the spawn of Satan and Eve. And therefore, if you kill a Jew, you are doing their unborn children a favor, because their unborn children would eventually spend a lifetime in hell because they haven't been baptized. And as for blacks and minorities, they are mud people. They are not even human. Jews are human, but they're the human spawn of Satan, whereas blacks and people of color are not even human. So if you kill them, you're not killing a human being. And so that kind of, that has been, it's part of our culture since the 1940s, a minority part. But at Charlottesville, people saw that come out in a way they never had before. And I'm just interested, Josh and Luke, did you ever come across anybody talking about Christian identity?
Maybe not the specific, details that you revealed there, and that's something that I'd love to research more and dive into. But that is part of how we've seen, religion being used as a weapon to divide even people who are religious themselves. It's a shame to see, Christian Americans in some of these extremist groups treat Black Americans this way, especially considering many of them might be Christian themselves, or Jewish Americans who are also worshiping in their own way. It doesn't seem very, very Christian-like to me.
I do have one thing here for congratulations for the two of you. which says, "I applaud you two young men for working on this very old and complex issue at such a young age. You're on the road to a great film career." That's nice to hear.
It's very nice. Thank you.
From their lips to
Again.
God's ear.
If anyone in the audience has a question, this is the time to ask now. Do our two filmmakers have anything they want to add at this point?
Well, I guess we can give some more insight on the banner drop scene, and how that day was looking. Because that was for sure our most challenging day, and I think either of us, we really didn't know what to expect at all. I think, well, one, I guess we're not the greatest artists when on the actual banners, but I guess the message got across. But that actual day of shooting, Josh and I were like, yeah, we want to really tie in kind of us reclaiming the spot and fighting against the white nationalists who put their banners there. We want to put our own in that exact spot. I think we didn't know what the reaction would be. And when we put our banners, and right when we put them on, we started hearing honks. And I know it might seem edited, but those are like real honks that we were getting, and real like support. And I think that was something that I don't think either of us was expecting, that we would actually get so much support in that way. And I think that really made us feel empowered and emboldened. And I think that's something we're so happy that was captured. And I think it was really, really one of the most special moments of filming I've done.
Yeah, because I was thinking about what it would be like to be, a Jewish family or a black family driving under the bridge that day, where it said, honk if you think Kanye was right, or honk that the Jews are starting a race war. Maybe you've got kids in the back seat, you have to try to explain that to them. Whereas the flip side is we were up there doing that and everyone was honking, and maybe someone was having just an okay day, but they drove by and they, felt empowered. And even though it was just a couple hours on one freeway, one afternoon in Los Angeles, the fact that we wanted to capture it on film is now something that we can take with us on the road and show people across different highways.
I have a question. We were talking about this right before, the program started. And I'm actually right here. I thought that the final shot, we're all in agreement that that final shot is so powerful. I think one of the things that's really powerful about it is that there's a moment where you drop the banners and you don't hear anything at first, right? Like it takes a few seconds before the honks actually start. And you feel this kind of anxiety because you're like, oh God, did nobody honk? Is anybody gonna honk? What's gonna happen? What's gonna be what are we gonna find out about what people really think about, like whether they love Black people and Jewish people? So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the anxieties you might have had about dropping those banners. I mean, were you really confident that people were going to honk, or were you kind of like, oh, we don't know what's gonna happen here?
I will be honest, we were too confident. I don't think when we did it, we had like no clue what to expect. We just knew we had to do it. So it was very nerve-wracking, and I'm happy to translate it to the actual film, but that was our really natural reaction. Just because it was really a really big stunt on our end. But I think just seeing the support that we got was just really, really wonderful. And even in part, I think something that we also discussed, having our final banner, we had like kind of 3 banners, the first 2 from us, and then the one that we just leave there. And I think what we really want to say about us leaving that last banner there is like, okay, we are making a statement and we're making a stance, and even when the camera goes back and into the distance, we're still united together, we're still friends. And we really wanted to showcase as a way to continue on and to pass it on for our audience and to our viewers that, hey, you see someone that looks different than you, don't be afraid to talk and create a friendship, and that's something we really wanted just to overall say with that, our whole final moment of the film.
Absolutely. And every time in our limited screenings we've had of the film so far, we'll screen it in a pretty packed theater, and a lot of people clap while the film is still playing during the part where the banners are revealed. Like it's almost an audience participation moment. And like I was saying a minute ago, on that afternoon, we probably only were able to show those banners to this amount of cars that drove past. But now that we can play it in all these different theaters and screenings like this, everyone can see, that there are people like Luke and I ready to help carry the torch. And we have a lot of work to do, but it starts with the work. If we don't do anything, then nothing's going to get done.
And it's great to feel that sense of affirmation to close on that note. And it's what we all need.
We have a question here from one of the audience who wants to know, how can they contact the Black Jewish Justice Alliance in LA that you mentioned in the film?
Yeah, they're online. Maybe one of the best ways is to email us. We could probably help get you in touch. Maybe that might be the best way.
I believe they have their email available online.
Yeah.
If you look them up, if you look at Pastor Q and Rabbi Aryeh,
Yeah.
and in their organization, you should be able to find their email. But if not, you can also email us as well, or follow our Instagram page, like I said, and you can just DM us and we can see that information.
There's also a question that most of the speakers that you had were men. Did you try to get more women involved in the film?
Yeah, that's definitely something that we would have liked to have had more of, and also we know that this is an ongoing topic and something that we are interested in continuing to film interviews for, and possibly expanding this into something that perhaps also covers other communities. We talked about maybe even turning this into a series where different episodes follow communities in America that are being affected by this replacement theory and a lot of this rhetoric that we see that has a direct impact on people's lives. So definitely something that we want to, keep exploring and learn from more people.
All right. I think on that note, I want to thank our two filmmakers for bringing up really important conversations about the historical commonalities and unity between the Black and Jewish community. And I love the idea of your series, because it is part of the great replacement theory, because it's all non-whites, and Jews are considered non-white for our audience here. And amongst the extremist far-right community, they've always been considered non-white. I again want to thank the two of you. I want to thank our audience for tuning in today. And I want to welcome everyone to tune in again on Sunday, October 27th, when we're going to have another Casden conversation on from October 7th to November 5th, the impact of the Gaza war on the US presidential elections. And to all of you who are listening today, if you're not on our mailing list, just go and Google Casden Institute and put yourself on our mailing list, and we'd be delighted to have you as part of the larger community. I wish to thank our filmmakers. I wish to thank Michael and Elena, and I wish to thank all of you for tuning in today. Have a wonderful Sunday. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
You.